I'm Christian Catalini, an associate professor at MIT and the founder of the MIT Crypto Economics Lab. As you will see, I've taken the Flash Talk name literally, so I'll try to go really fast and show a lot of content. The phenomenon of cryptocurrencies and blockchain has exploded. When we did our research study in 2014, you can see the Google search volume for both terms was extremely low. And after that, there's been an explosion of approaches in this space between competing coins, competing standards, and we're definitely headed towards the early days of what people are started calling a dot-coin bubble, with all the problems that we remember from the dot-com. Why are we seeing such an explosion? It literally takes 75 lines of code to launch your own cryptocurrency. So the barriers to entry are extremely low, which is both good and terribly bad. Initial coin offerings have outpaced, in terms of funding provided to entrepreneurs across the globe, traditional VC funding in this space at a pace that accelerated over the last few months. Kickstarter, in 10 years, did $3.5 billion of capital allocation. This phenomenon has moved to $9 billion in the last 18 months. But where's the breakthrough from an economics perspective? Let's take a step back and ask ourselves, what is the promise of this technology? When you talk to computer scientists, the answer that you hear over and over is this term about censorship resistance. And that term is really lost in translation for most people that are dealing with day-to-day business. Censorship is something that we don't worry most of the time. And I think that most of that, it's lost really in translation. What computer scientists really mean when they talk about censorship, they talk about market power. This is a technology that can disentangle the benefits, the positive benefits from network effects, from the detrimental effects of market power. And so it's a game changer in how we design digital platforms online. This is the result of the change in two fundamental economic costs. I won't have enough time to go into detail, but we briefly named them as cost of verification of information and the cost of networking. Let me briefly give you an overview. What do we mean by lower cost of verification? With a blockchain-like technology, you can build data integrity in your applications from the ground up. And here's an example from a pilot at MIT. What you're seeing in the business world is just more of what we've done before, just with cheaper settlement and reconciliation across multiple organizations. And the financial sector, accounting are, of course, the first ones to move because those assets are born digital. The other key breakthrough that happened with Bitcoin is that for the first time in history, we're able to define scarce digital property rights. This is something that we didn't know how to do. If you take a digital dollar bill and you send it between two users, you need to place an intermediary between those two users to verify that that dollar bill is not being double spent. So now we can define digital goods that are unique, tradable, and exchangeable, and can operate without relying on traditional intermediaries. And we're seeing experiments in this space, from store of value to computation to data storage. You're turning a market like the cloud into a spot commodity. The second cost I want to talk about is what we call cost of networking. What we really mean is the ability to coordinate economic activity on a global scale with new types of intermediaries. What's the definition of blockchain technology? It's a technology that allows you to deliver internet-level consensus. So think about a network of economic agents. This could be individuals, it could be firms, it could be robots, it could be IoT devices that agree at regular intervals about the true state of some shared data. If you take something like Uber, agents would be customers and drivers, agree at regular intervals about rides, reputation systems, and payments. And so all that shared data is what the platform clears on a daily basis. When you think about those three building blocks, you can rebuild many of the digital platforms that we use every day and love under different economics. Now, of course, this won't apply everywhere, but in some cases will allow us to build new types of digital platforms. These platforms will be able to crowdsource key resources across the globe, an example of file storage. They'll be able to attract and coordinate top talent. This is a crowdsourcing example where data scientists across the globe are given tokens, which represent equity and a share in the stakes of a decentralized hedge fund. You can use it to incentivize early adopters. This is from our paper that we published in Science, where we show that incentivizing early adopters to jump on a technology first can have massive effects on the ultimate impact of that technology. Let me just pause for a second and talk about the Bitcoin playbook, because this is what's now taking over multiple different verticals. What happened with Bitcoin? Someone wrote some code, And everybody could look at that code and realize that if I follow the incentives of this system, wherever I am, I'll be rewarded. If I provide security to this distributed, decentralized financial network, and the token appreciates, I'm going to earn rewards for being early. And that's the market capitalization of Bitcoin over time as more security was provided behind the network. So think about that for a second. This started with amateurs in a garage running big fans on their laptops and then their GPUs. Of course, economies of scale, so massive horse race from CPUs to customized silicon. Bitcoin today looks a lot more like this. When people think about the value of Bitcoin, they forget to remember that there's massive capital investment and infrastructure that has been deployed all across the globe to secure a financial network. Think about that image for a second. When in history were we able to deploy a global platform, global infrastructure, without action by any single government or any single firm? Railways, telecommunications. That was always concerted investment by entities that we recognize. This happened because someone wrote code on the internet. And now we have this massive infrastructure, which of course introduces a number of problems, but serves a specific purpose. People have taken this playbook of writing code, programming incentives, and coordinating talent, capital, and resources across the globe in what people have called initial coin offerings, which are essentially the use of these tokens to build new types of digital platforms. And there's a number of problems with ICOs in the short term, but the problem is really to build new digital ecosystems. The phenomenon has completely exploded in 2017. We didn't think we would have enough data to study this until the explosion that you see on that graph. The average size of these funding events is 1 to 5 million. So it's way beyond angel investment. We're talking about, in some countries, Series A, VC. Most of these operations, of course, don't raise any money. It's extremely skewed distribution. But when you're looking at where smart capital is coming, this is only accredited investors and qualified purchasers. So these are institutions that do investments as a daily business in the US. You can see that there's thriving investment. This is about $1 billion across the US. This is across the globe. Most of the capital, contrary to the public narrative that this will be the end of Silicon Valley, is going to the United States. Most of the activity is Silicon Valley and New York based. But you can see that there's capital flowing everywhere. And if you ask where the investors are, they're everywhere. There's not a single region where you don't see some activity and investment. What does this mean? In this graph, any country name that you see above the red diagonal received more funding in technology through initial coin offerings than through regular Series A venture capital. Okay? So think about that for a moment. Of course, this was driven by the hype and enthusiasm and overinvestment of 2017, but shows that the mechanism can operate at a scale that's quite significant, especially in places where you may have the computer science talent, like Eastern Europe, but you don't have the same angel and VC infrastructure that you have here. And even the United States, it's pretty close to the diagonal. If you compare it to seed capital, even for California, this has already outpaced traditional investment channels. It turns out that it's much more of a complement to venture capital than a substitute. But what's interesting to see is that now we're seeing thousands of experiments across the globe building digital platforms using this new toolkit, these new incentive systems that you can build around these tokens. I look forward to discussing this with you in more detail. We've done a population level study of about 1,800 of these ICOs, and there's different regulations. So for example, Switzerland and Singapore have been much more clear about how they plan to consider these between securities or commodities. There's a whole spectrum on the legislatory side. And on our side, we have SEC and CFTC that both have jurisdiction over these items. What's interesting is that Switzerland and Singapore have been getting critical mass. Now, this is far from creating path dependency and kind of establishing a leadership in this space, but out of about 9 billion, the United States is first with over 2 billion. The next country on that list is Switzerland. And it's not just because those teams incorporated in Switzerland for legal reasons. This is where the teams are. And so that's where kind of the opportunity and the challenge is for the United States at this moment. Thank you very much.